Hi guys, I'm live. Hopefully this is gonna be a fun video. This is like storytelling time for me, um, but it has a point to it. I want to talk about long hair for a second. Um, this story comes to me from my wife's brother-in-law, guy named Ben, told me this one time. He's a very wise dude. He told me a story that had to do with long hair. I'd like to tell you guys it, and then tell you what I feel about it and how it relates to rock and roll and even stuff in the Bible or whatever. Um, Back in some day, I don't know what war it was or what era it was. I guess I wasn't paying attention when he told me to that fact. Um, the government, the U.S. government saw that the Indians, the American Indians, had very good intuition with the land. They could help them fight. The Indians could sense things. They could sense when things were over the hill, or they could sense what from the land. They could pick up vibes about whether they should attack or not, or whether they were being attacked or not, and things like that. So the government did a smart thing. They recruited the Indians, or at least some of them, to join the army or navy or military of some sort. But guess what? The first thing they did was one of the first things they did was to make them fit into a uniform. They cut the Indians' hair. They cut their hair, the Indians, so they would look like they would look like soldiers. They would look like the Americans soldiers did, and they would look like soldiers are supposed to look. And guess what? They lost their intuition. They didn't have the intuition with the land anymore. They were useless to the military once they cut their hair. I'm not sure totally if that's just because the change shocked the Indians and it was irrelevant, but just the change threw them off. But more likely to me is that the long hair was part of their intuition. It fed their intuition. It was part of the equation that made them intuitive. And I've had long hair for 30 years now. Well, give or take. I guess I started growing it out in 1992. So that 30 plus years I've had long hair. Um, ex, uh, Except I cut it a couple times just to make sure that I could live without it, like it wouldn't destroy me if I cut it. And then I had to cut it to get baptized as a Jehovah's Witness a long time ago, but I totally threw that away, and I'm never going to do that again, and I grew it out again. But other than that, I've had long hair for 30 plus years. And um, I think it helps my music even. I'm not going to, rather than brag about, well, I'm intuitive and this and that, because that could be just my word and who cares. But it does affect it. I think my long hair helps my creativity. I think it makes me intuitive. Um, I'll just share, I guess. I'm very sensitive to things around me. I can tell if someone's behind me without even looking. I can tell if I can cross the street and not get hit by a car without even turning my head. I can tell if my head's about to bump into a bush or something and I duck out of the way and I didn't even see the bush with my physical eye. I don't know if that's purely just a thing I have or if it's my long hair helps that. But I think it's possible the long hair has something to do with it. And I want to make another, and I want to bring it back to rock and roll or to rock and roll. In 1995, because I was here, I was in the planet in 1995. The rockers had a thing. It started with Eddie Van Halen and Sammy Hagar, and they said in 1995 they were hanging around Valerie, and they had scissors in their hands, and Eddie even commented to Sammy or Sammy to Eddie, hey, isn't it a drag to have long hair? So just on the spur of the moment, just on a whim, they had Valerie cut Sammy Hagar's and Eddie Van Halen's hair in 1995, and the music just really went downhill to me. The album Van Halen 3, which came out in, I think, 2 years later, like in 1997 or something like that. Maybe it was 98, might have been 3 years later. It was really awful. And Van Halen, Eddie never really got his thing back to me. Um, he was still Eddie. He was still Eddie Van Halen. That's probably one of the top three greatest rock and roll guitar players that ever walked the earth, and that's probably maybe an understatement, even that. But it wasn't the same. And then it started a thing in rock and roll. Steve Vai cut his hair in 1995, and his music. Well, Steve is Steve. Steve can shred and all that, no matter what. But Paul Gilbert cut his hair, and everybody was cutting their hair, and it's like, and it wasn't even on a magazine. It said something or something, an interview or something. It said, "Oh, it's a rock star thing." Well, how can a rock star thing be what rock stars don't do? rock star thing. Rock stars just have long hair. How can it be a rock star thing to not have long hair? That would be a world thing or a regular person thing. But they didn't. It caught on, and people were cutting their hair left and right. And it wasn't even until like a year later, like 1996, when according to one source, the Rock had died. It said something about R.I.P. rock and roll, 1950 to 1996, implying that rock and roll lived 46 years, as if it was born in 50 but died in 1996. Why that year, 1996? Well, something tells me it has something to do with the haircutting vibe in rock stardom in 1995. It just and I didn't buy it. I don't buy that. I didn't cut my hair. I don't care if Steve Vai or Jesus cuts his hair. I'm not cutting my hair or whatever. Except the few times I told you I did. But and then one more anecdote to that. Even in the Bible, Samson supposedly had long hair and it got cut. Now that probably was because he disobeyed God, and that was God's punishment to take away his strength. But you never know if there wasn't a connection somehow between that. Why did Samson have short hair as his strength? Why was it long hair? I mean, there's something to that, I have a feeling. And in fact, Jesus is even portrayed traditionally as having long hair. We don't know. We don't have a picture of him or whatever, LOL. But he was a Nazarite, and I've heard that they were allowed to grow their hair long, or even were supposed to grow their hair long. So maybe that has something to do with his intuition. You never know. Anyway, that was my ode to long hair. Love you guys. Peace. Rock and roll.